Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Now, I know we have a lot of people who are new here, others who don't pay close attention, and some who basically want to be entertained. I don't do that here. So before I get into this morning's briefing, I just want to make it known I'm well aware of the situation with Jadarrius Rose, the truck driver who on July 4th was intentionally mauled by a police dog in Ohio. I'm also aware that he is currently being represented by Ben Crump. Now, I've said for many years now that when it comes to black people who are the victims of racial violence, particularly at the hands of the thugs in blue, I have a rule that I don't go putting on the cape for them, nor do I make it a point to champion them personally, because the pattern has been that too many of them or their family members are trying to finesse a check, and their mentality goes no further than that. Some quickie attention, or they hope a quickie little bag, even though those are starting to dry up. So no, I'm not going to be leaping to my feet and posting about these things when they occur, because we've been through this too many times. And some of you who are newer here may not be aware of this, but you need to be aware. Yes, I can and do speak about these things, and I'm not saying that the victims of these racial assaults don't deserve our support. The family of Ahmaud Arbery also had mush-mouth Crump in tow, but you could tell that the mother was the one leading the show on that one, and she made up her mind that the murderers were going to be put in a cage no matter what, and that she would make sure they never saw the outside of one so long as she lived. And I followed that one personally and supported that family regardless of who their lawyer was, and I encouraged others to do the same. But understand, the Ahmaud Arbery situation, that family, they're the exception, not the rule. So around here in the land of black empowerment with the black grassroots, we have to give these cases time to see how the victims, or in the case of someone who's been murdered, their family members react. And I don't move even based on what they do initially, because as we've all seen, people who in the beginning said the right things have broken bad on us far too often. Not all, but enough of them. Because far too often these family members of black people who have been killed do all kinds of off-code stuff that completely contradicts and undermines what we have been doing. Everything from saying that they didn't think it was about race, all the way up to asking the judge if they can hug the murderer in court. So for the people who think that because I'm not posting anything about this latest incident with Jadarrius Rose that I don't know about it, you're wrong. I know some of you practically live on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, and for a lot of you it's cathartic when you have some of the new voices of black media sound off on these things so you can feel as if there's been some kind of substantive response. I understand that, and you're justified in feeling that way. But we don't give responses merely because a crime was committed. We do it because it's necessary. Speaking up about a crime can very easily be misinterpreted as speaking up for the victim, and that can become a problem if the victim turns around and denies everything that we've said. If they undermine what we're doing, it becomes a problem. So for the folks who practically could not sit in their chairs still, waiting to see what was going to be said, at least from this microphone, I can say calm down. You must be new here. In the case of Jadarrius Rose, the thugs with badges in Ohio who used their attack dog to maul this man when his hands were up and he was on his knees fully complying, this piece of trash, the one who was responsible for it, he was fired from the local pig patrol that he was working for. But understand, they only did that not because he committed a crime, but because he had been talking about it after his superiors told him not to. At least that's the cover story they use. Keep in mind, this is the same Ohio where Tamir Rice was murdered. And those thugs out there, they went out of their way to make it clear they weren't going to do anything about the crime that this thug with a badge committed. The public outcry, though, put the bastards on the hot seat. And they don't know whether to spit or go blind right now. On the one hand, their so-called use of force board, which is clearly just a rubber stamp for police brutality out there, said that the violent attack that had been carried out was within department guidelines. But, as was reported by the white media, those so-called guidelines for when it's allowed to have the police maul someone with one of their dogs is, quote, if the handler reasonably believes that the individual has committed, is committing, or is threatening to commit any serious offense. Now, if that sounds ridiculously vague, that's because that's what they want it to be. The guidelines are not meant as a means of limiting when the police can do anything. It's simply meant as a phony rhetorical shield for them to hide behind and claim justification for all the laws and procedures they break. Their guidelines are contradictory, and they're supposed to be that way. That's how they want it to be. They give themselves permission to attack someone with their dogs if they merely claim to believe Someone has committed, is committing, or is threatening to commit a serious offense. And what constitutes a serious offense? Well, they just told you. Whatever they believe does. And of course, they always believe anything is a serious offense. They also state that they can have their attack dog maul someone if the person is physically resisting or threatening to resist arrest. What does threatening to resist arrest even mean? They don't say, and that's the entire point. Either someone is physically resisting arrest or they're not. You can't be threatening to physically resist arrest. Either you are or you're not. So that phrase, threatening to resist arrest, that means whether you're physically resisting arrest or not. That's all it means. But even if you're dumb enough to believe what the police say by their own guidelines, Mr. Rose wasn't resisting at all. He was in fact completely complying. He had his hands up. He was on his knees. The only way he could have been more compliant would have been if he put the handcuffs on himself. This was all a blatant violation of their own guidelines, but as I've explained, they have themselves made it clear their guidelines are whatever they say they are. And keep in mind, the only reason this incident happened at all was because the police wanted to search the man's truck, claiming it was some sort of just regular inspection. We're just doing one of our regular stops where we inspect vehicles. Of course, they found absolutely nothing. Mr. Rose was falsely arrested, but they had to release him. They don't have anything on him. He committed no crime. The police did. Now, the department claims to have fired the thug in question, but that was only due to public pressure. Their cover story, however, supports the violence used against Mr. Rose, and they claim that the thug with a badge only got fired because he had been talking about the violent attack he committed, and he had lied to the police chief and claimed that he hadn't been talking about it. So they wanted to make it clear, even if they were forced to have to act like they were doing something about it, they wanted everyone to know, well, we're not doing this in response to the actual crime itself. That's the message that they're sending. Yeah, we know the public's putting pressure on us, and yeah, we have to do something, and we know that you pressured us to do it, but we're not going to say it. No matter how the white media tries to report it, the bad guys are sticking by this violent crime. They didn't fire this guy because of what he did. They made it clear, well, we're firing him because of a technicality. It's some paperwork, some department procedures. You maul somebody with a police dog, you break the law, well, we're not going to fire you for that. That's justified. Oh, but if we ask you to keep your mouth shut about it and you don't do it, well, that we can't have. Now, there's another aspect of this that needs to be discussed, and that's the right of citizens to stop criminality by the state, which is who these thugs with badges are representing. It's certainly who's protecting them, the state. We have to begin understanding that citizens have to be able to depend upon one another to protect each other from police violence, and to know that the public will defend those who defend themselves. The public is being forced against their will to support a taxpayer-funded street gang. This is not just state-sanctioned violence, it is state-sponsored and state-originated violence. When the thugs with badges commit these crimes, nobody in the government says, oh, well, we need laws to punish these guys. No calling for new laws or new anything. Instead, they either say nothing, which is what people do when they agree with the status quo, or the governmental leaders decide to defend the criminality, but they don't oppose it. This is not law enforcement. It is lawlessness. When you have these roving gangs roaming the streets, highways, and byways and ambushing citizens, that is lawlessness. When you have criminals who tell you that they can attack or kill you regardless of whether you allegedly resist arrest or not, that is lawlessness. When they tell you that the standard for whether they attack or kill you is based not on the law or even the facts, but solely based on what they believe, that is lawlessness. Now, how do you restore order to the chaos? First of all, you have to understand the so-called authorities have no legitimacy. Legitimacy is the authority conferred by one group onto another. In 2020, the bad guys got just a taste of what can happen when the people revoke their legitimacy. That badge doesn't give them legitimacy, and neither do these politicians. Legitimacy comes from the people. In 2020, they were reminded of that. However, the uprisings of 3 years ago were done in a very general way. In order to effect a paradigm shift, what's required is for citizens to protect each other in a very specific way, on a case-by-case basis. Citizens have to make it known that when they see the police menacing a citizen, pointing guns at them for the sake of intimidating them, see the police attacking a citizen, see them murdering a citizen, that the public understands this is lawlessness, and that they will make sure that law and order is restored. But one person or even a group of people who are dedicated to stopping this state-sanctioned anarchy isn't enough. They must be aggressively supported by the masses, who understand how out of control these roving gangs have always been, and that this has to be stopped. The police will come to understand that they won't be allowed to confer immunity from law unto themselves. They won't be allowed to arbitrarily declare that anything they do is justified because they believe it is. There's more than a few cases, but what's missing is the consistency. We've already seen citizens like Kenneth Walker protect themselves from police violence, so we know it works. What's required now is for us to expand and intensify this program of citizen self-defense. The thugs with badges have made it clear that they will only pretend to give some passing consideration to the law if there is sufficient public pressure. And so it falls to the citizens to make sure that the pressure is applied, and applied in full. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Burkett Cochrane, Chris Johnson, Ryan Lee, Deborah Martinez, and Ikegas Dorset. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.